Have you ever felt like your experience of abuse didn't count because it didn't fit the story you were always told? Maybe because your abuser was a woman, or because you controlled your own bank account, or because you believed being a good partner meant being endlessly patient with their trauma. Today, we're deconstructing three insidious myths that made my own shame worse and kept me from seeing the truth and being free. Now, this is important to talk about because myths about abuse are dangerous. They're dangerous because they reinforce shame and isolation, which is the perfect stage for violence to take place, right? Not only that, it also decenters the actions that people choosing to use violence take. Instead of focusing on what they're doing and their choices, the myths about abuse sort of allow for no attempt at accountability and no attempt to go to the source of the problem, which is someone's choice to use violence. And not only that, they perpetuate the idea that a survivor, that someone experiencing violence can control an abuser's choices, right? Which the undertone of that is that the survivor, the person experiencing violence, just needs to try something harder. And all of these myths not only they existed in society, but I had internalized many of them, and therefore put me in a certain situation. So let me just give some examples. All right, so the first myth I want to talk about is only men and only people who are physically larger um, are or can be abusive. Now, it's a myth. It's just not true. And this it one I this myth did not register to me, and or let me take a step back. The what I was experiencing did not register as an abuse because I was a queer woman and my abuser was a queer woman. And I think, there's some misogyny entwined in this, right? And it's misogyny and sort of like an implicit unearned trust. Like, oh, women don't have the strength to be violent or abusive. It's just not in their nature or character, and not only that, this is more so important, I think, is the implicit unearned trust, right? It's the assumption that, well, because you don't fit this criteria, automatically you're a safe person. You don't need to demonstrate specific actions to have trust. You just get it right away. And I think the myth of only men and people who are physically larger that kind of creates space for that implicit unearned trust. Um, Another reason why um, the abuse that I was experiencing didn't register is because I happen to be physically larger than my partner. I'm 6'2", and my partner, she was like maybe 5'7", 5'8". I don't remember exactly how tall she was. And honestly, I don't remember heights less than 6 feet. Sorry, not sorry. It's the life I've lived. But yeah, I just, the it didn't register because of or I guess what didn't register is the fact that I'm not really in danger. I'm bigger than her. So what is the issue here? And the problem with this myth within my context is that it really decentered her actions, right? It made abuse an impossible explanation for what I was experiencing. And that void of an explanation sort of created space for another distorted explanation, and at the time, the sort of the false narrative that ran through the thread of that relationship that normalized all the crazy was, oh, this is like we're doing unconventional healing because we're a queer couple breaking generational curses, yada yada yada. And this is what it looks like. And not only that, this myth in addition to creating space for a false narrative that normalized violence, it also sort of prohibited like my ability to make connections around her blow-ups, which was the language we used for her violence within the relationship. And I only connected after the fact, but after I reflected on it and realized, all of her violent outbursts, like the physically violent outbursts, always happened when I was sitting in bed or in some sort of like physically vulnerable position. Okay. And so, but in this myth of only men and people physically larger, it's very easy to sort of glaze over that because it doesn't fit the myth. And not only that, because of this myth, for me, resources felt somewhat inaccessible to me during a really critical time. I will say, a lot of the spaces that I went to, they were understanding, like they didn't judge me, but it also there was just a discomfort when and also sort of like a shame that when I would reach out to help, people just assumed that the person doing this to me was a man, and like I had to like explain and clarify, actually no, this is a woman, and it's something that I felt embarrassed and ashamed of. And not only that, during the last year of the relationship, after like we spent some time apart after a very very violent incident, and I had we were at that time for all intents purposes done, but she was kind of we were married, so we were trying to like detangle all the things, or I was. And I went to, I want to say, like a women's shelter or some type of like local support group, like going for help. And it could have been the timing, it could have been so many other things, but like I told them my story and they turned me away. And it took so much for me to gain the courage to like go there, walk up the steps and ask for help. And yeah, it just they turned me away. And so and there were a lot of other things at play, but shortly after that, I went back. And so this myth is no bueno for me. Like, it's just not true that only men and only people who are physically larger can be abusive. And I think one of the most dangerous things about this is decentering people's actions, right? We're not looking instead of, it's just decentering their actions and the choices that they make, right? All right, myth number two. Financial abuse is only when the other person makes more and or has complete access and or control of the accounts. And so it did not, I will say this, I did not realize that I experienced financial abuse probably, I would say, until a year and a half out of the relationship. And it did not register that this is something that was happening because, I made more money. I had made more money from the start throughout the entire relationship. Not only that, I had chosen and like authorized all transactions in my with my financial accounts. So I just didn't see it. I didn't understand. Um, but the problem with this myth is that it decentered her actions. One thing that she did was sort of like future faking shared responsibility. So one example is, living. I remember shortly after maybe like a few months after we moved in together, she just tells me one day, I can't pay rent, I can't pay this, I can't pay anything. Like everything is maxed out. And I forgot exactly like all the specific details, but I just remember one day she just couldn't pay for anything. And we had chosen to, we were on a lease together. We were living within our means based off of the knowledge that I had about her finances. But with her saying she couldn't do pay for any of that, that dramatically changed. And somehow, the only way out of that scenario was for me to take out a personal loan to like cover all her credit card debt. And this was before we were married. And so, which means that it was mine forever, even after we got married and even after she stopped paying it. Um, Another way, future faking shared responsibility looks like is there are some mysterious circumstances around, her last full-time job experience while we were together, but like after that sort of ended, which I still don't really understand why, she just refused to get an additional job. And so, again, with two incomes, we were living within our means, but all of a sudden, I had to use all of my resources to pay for things that were also in my name. Um, Another way that this myth sort of like decenters actions is, um, you know, my ex there was used anger and therefore the threat of violence to sort of marshal the use of my resources according to what she wanted. One example was I remember when we first started living together and we would like order takeout, or I would just like order random things for myself, and she would get really upset, she'd get really upset that I didn't offer for her or that I didn't pay. Like, felt like it was the worst affront ever. And it was never directly like from doing that to like a violent incident, but by the time that had started, I knew enough to be afraid. I knew enough to like want to avoid her being upset because I didn't want it to lead to anything else. So then all of a sudden I'm paying for more than I would have, initially planned or intended to on a teacher salary, mind you, because I wanted to avoid her anger. Yeah. And so those are just some examples. Oh, and another example is um mm, I'll save that for another video on another day, but just know I just made a like actually I'll just say it. I purchased a Roomba um for to clean our floors because I hate dirty floors. Like I need clean floors. And I didn't recognize it at the time, but the relationship was sucking the life out of me and I didn't have the energy to clean. So I thought a Roomba would be a great compromise. And I purchased it and I felt so excited. And when it came in the mail, it was like a pin dropped, like eggshell. She was like, "Oh, you bought that? That's a lot of money." And like, I didn't realize, I don't know. I just felt like I was in trouble, which is crazy because I bought it with my money on my credit card. And she wasn't gonna fucking clean the floors. So yeah. But after that, it was like, oh, I guess I can't buy things without a certain kind of clearance, which we talked about it, but whatever. Um, but yeah, this myth really does. I feel like it makes this type of abuse invisible, which really, for me, reinforce shame and like a false narrative and revisionist history. Like that, the false narrative that I internalize as a result of this myth is I'm bad with money and I can't be trusted. And it's a false narrative because literally before I met this person, I had 403B, I purchased stocks, I paid off my student loans, my credit score was pushing 800, and I did this on a teacher's salary living in New York City. Like I'm great with money, but because of this narrative about financial abuse, I just couldn't see it. And so if something is wrong, the only one visibly left to blame was me. So that's what I did. I internalized that. And I sort of stayed frozen in that space until the narrative shifted. And so that's the second myth. The last myth is myth number three. If people experience trauma, you have to be patient, compassionate, and understanding because that is what makes you a good person and even better, a good spouse or partner. Okay. Now, this myth gets under my skin because I feel like it is so easily co-optable. And I believe this myth reinforces the idea that the why, your fucked up childhood, trumps the what, the abuse. And not only that, when people make choices to cause harm, you have to be there no matter what to heal it. And how it affects you, the harm, it doesn't matter. And not only that, like if it's selfish to protect yourself and to choose not to engage with doing something with someone who's doing harmful things because it's selfish if they have no one else would be there for them. And the abuser's choices are your problems that you have to fix. Like this, and this is where like I really don't it totally um ignores, decenters, deprioritize someone's safety. Like, none of this shit is your problem. None of this was my problem, but I had internalized this myth. And so it really, it's so dangerous to underscore the idea that someone else's well-being, regardless of the choices that they're making to support whatever they say they want to support, matter more than your own safety. And I don't think that's what people intend to communicate. And I do think that is the impact. Um, this really does perpetuate the idea that a survivor can control an abuser's choices, right? Survivor, the person experiencing violence needs to try, and I believe this. I believed I needed to try harder by being better, by rolling back a boundary, by anticipating needs that she or the other person doesn't communicate. And most importantly, by erasing and suppressing your own needs in order to be able to meet theirs. That's what it looked like within the context of the abuse I experienced. Oh, one perfect example was around sleep. My ex would just like to stay up late, would stay up late, sort of like drinking and watching TV, and then would get emotional. And then, like, at first I would stay up with her, but then I was like, I have to, I have to get to work. Like, I have to sleep. And it just became, became the evil person for like believing that I needed to sleep more than she needed to be comforted or consoled. And just despite what she was or wasn't doing to like deal with her shit. And so, what this myth hides, what it hid for me, and what I believe this myth hides in general is like, one, my ex wife, she always had the power to make a different choice. Um, Not only that, she is not the only one with childhood trauma. I had it too. Like, and not only that, her childhood trauma was not my fault, problem, or responsibility to fix. And also, having trauma does not give you a right to harm others. And being a good partner does not mean that you need to be a receptacle for unprocessed trauma and anger. And I really did believe that was where my value came from. That's what it meant to be a ride or die. Talk about another toxic myth, right? I thought that's what it meant, and it just simply wasn't true. And dismantling these myths is how we release the shame they create. There's no way around that. If you want to explore all 8 of the common myths about domestic violence, I've gone even deeper in the companion article, which is available now. The link is right at the top at the of the description. And on Monday, we'll be doing an autopsy of another harmful belief. Make sure you're subscribed.